Best effort I've got for you. I want to tell you about what it takes to be a peach grower, because I wasn't one. I did not have a farming background. We bought our property on Northwest Catawba Road in 2004, and in 2005 I told my wife, hey, I think we ought to put some peaches in. Wouldn't that be a good idea? And she said, no. And so we put in 50 trees, and the next year I put in another 50, and another 50, and another 50. So here's what it takes to grow a peach. I'm going to frame it all in as to what a peach farmer goes through with the first couple minutes, and then I will ask you if you'd rather talk about the history of peaches, or the Alberta peach, or the Red Haven peach. How many of you can name more than 2 peaches? Raise your hand. More than 2 varieties. All right, shout out. What variety do you know? Red Haven. What else? Freestone is not a variety. Flaming Fury is about 20 different varieties. Yes. What else? I'm sorry? Jubilee. Any others? All right, there are over 400 varieties of peaches. Over 400 varieties of peaches. Many of which will not grow here, many of which will not grow other places. That's based on what scientists have figured is called chill hours. A peach tree has to go through X amount of days, or hours actually, below 42 degrees in order to produce peaches. Therefore, you don't see a lot of peaches in Florida or Texas or the extremely southern states, because they don't get enough chill hours. Every variety of peach has a different amount of chill hours that scientists have determined this variety needs that many hours in order to produce. Okay, so with that being said, then there's 400 varieties. Why do you choose different ones? Well, we grow 21 varieties, and everybody says, well, which one's the best? It changes every year, because they're all within 1% of each other in terms of taste. It's not like an apple. They don't all taste differently. They all taste the same. The only difference is, somebody mentioned back here, Freestone or Cling. The first half of the season, all peaches are Cling. The second half of the year, all peaches, all the different 200 varieties are Freestone. It means it'll come off the pit easily, or it won't come off the pit easily. Okay? So, with that being said, so what does it take to grow peaches? The first thing you do is you got some land. It should be high land or slanted land so that it'll drain, because a peach tree, if it is underwater, if the roots are soggy wet for 48 hours, sometimes only 36 hours, it will die. And I can attest to that, because I was an early farmer and I lost 100 of my 300 peach trees one year because it rained for 3 consecutive days and I had no place to drain the water. 100 trees died that year out of 300. Peach trees do not like to be extremely cold. The year before the flood year, it got to 17 below zero one night in February, and 100 of my mature trees died. In fact, every mature tree in this area died. Not only me, but the 2 other growers, which, by the way, there are 3 now. 3 growers on Catawba Island. At one point, there were close to 200 growers. Now there's 3 of us, me, Dave Howell, and Quentin Smith. Okay, so you buy some peaches, you've got some land that's not going to flood, you try to keep it high because it's going to die if it's low. Then the first year, when it comes in, it's usually 6 feet tall, and the moment you plant it, you cut it off to about 3 feet high, and what that does is that makes the tree grow in an open vase. If you ever get a chance to look at a peach tree, if it's done properly, it's hollow in the middle. As much as it looks like a big ball of vegetation, it's hollow in the middle. And then every spring, you prune every tree so that you get rid of dead wood, and you get rid of wood that grows into the middle. You keep the center hollow so sunlight and air can get in. And in my case, I have 300 trees. That takes me the entire month of March. I spend 7 days a week during the month of March, except when it's below 35 degrees. I tell my wife it's too damn cold, I'm not going out. So keep in mind that the early growers that had 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 trees, they had multiply that times the 300 trees I have. Most of them had very large families. If you see any of the postcards, they had the wife and 6 kids all out pruning. And the next picture you see, they had the wife and the 6 kids all out picking, and so they all had big families, and that's part of the reason that there's only 3 of us left. So I got to cut this down to give you time to. So after pruning, you spend a month pruning, and then about 6 weeks later, I spend an entire month thinning. Every peach tree will put on peaches so thick that they look like clusters of grapes. We take over 500 peaches off of every tree by twisting each peach off one at a time. And that takes an entire month of May. So, and that's on 300 trees. If you can imagine what they did with 3,000 trees, they had those kids out there working hard. Okay? At least it was warmer in May than March. Then we spray. Insects are horrible on peaches. You can get away with it in your home garden. You know, if you have some worms and some bugs and stuff, so what? You just cut around it. But if you want to try and buy it from a commercial farmer, believe me, those are the last ones that are sitting on the table because nobody took them. And I don't blame you. I would too. So we spray, believe it, every 7 to 10 days of the summer. I'm in a Tyvek suit and a gas mask and spraying. But we're all extremely careful with what we spray and how we spray it and when we spray it. So don't worry about that part. And then the harvesting comes. In the early days, it was not uncommon for a farmer to take 3 wagons of 100 bushel of peaches to be auctioned off in downtown Portland. And that would take one person a week to harvest. That's a lot of peaches. So that's the framework. Now, so with that being said, I want to meet somebody's needs of a question of either the history of peaches, the decline of the peaches, the Red Haven peach, the Alberta peach. Somebody tell me, shout out something you'd like. Yes.
You said clean and peach stone. How about the split stone?
Okay. Here's a question. That's an imperfection in the growth. The split stone shouldn't have split pit. We call it. It's not a disease, but especially common in early peaches. That when they grow, it'll actually split the pit right inside the peach. And a lot of you have had a peach. You opened it up, and the thing's opened up, and most of the times it's fine. Sometimes it's got mold or an earwig or something crawling out of it, and this can't be avoided. It's nothing that anybody wants. It happens, and sometimes you can't tell it's there, and sometimes you can. If there's a big gap in the top, you'll know it's there. How about some other? Yes.
About years ago, it seemed like most of this island, I call it an island, was full of peach trees. What's happened? Can you give a little bit of that?
You mean the history of? Yeah, I'll try to make this brief, Craig. You said you got 10 minutes. Oh, Craig. I just got to choke on. Real quickly, this place was all grapes. Catawba Island at one time produced 1 million pounds of grapes. There were 71 wineries within driving horse and wagon distance of this spot. 71 wineries and 1 million pounds of grapes. In 1869, a guy named James Gamble said, you know what, I'm going to take a gamble and I'm going to switch over, I'm going to plant 1,000 peach trees. And there are reports that a lot of people called him crazy, stupid, whatever. He was on to things. By the next year, Reynolds planted 1,000 trees, and Walter Smith also planted a bunch. But here's the story. Here's the rest of the story that you don't hear about. He wasn't taking that much of a gamble. First of all, apples at the time were selling for 30 to 35 cents a bushel, and peaches were selling for $1 to $2.50 a bushel. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if I can make peaches go, that's a better way to go. He had also, before the Civil War, he had an orchard in not Hamilton County, starts with an H. Highland County. It's east of Cincinnati. He had an orchard before the Civil War where he grew peaches. So he knew how to grow them. He knew that it would work. But he went into the Civil War. He fought in the Battle of Bull Run, and when he came out, he came to Catawba, and that's when, a couple of years after he was here, he said, you know what? I'm not so crazy about grapes. Plus, they have a disease called brown rot going through the grapes right now. I think I'll put in some peach trees. And kind of the rest is history. It grew and grew and grew and grew. If you want to know about the decline came basically right around the time of the Second World War, or when it ended. The Congress passed some laws to get rid of tariffs and support, and there were tariffs on imported peaches up until 1947. And in 1947, Congress said we're not gonna supplement peach growers, and we're not gonna put tariffs on imported peaches. And that was kind of the demise of Catawba. Well, along with three other things, kind of the perfect storm. Erie Army Depot went in 1918. Standard Products opened in 1935. And on June 14th, 1947, New Departure opened up the doors, and they employed 4,000 people. So by now, the 90-year-old farmers whose kids, remember those kids that were doing all the picking and pruning and all that stuff? They're young adults, and the parents would say, hey, do you want to take over the farm? And I can work over New Departure and make more than that. And by the way, your peach crop, 1 out of every 3 years, gets frozen off because it was 1 day of frost and it's gone. That was kind of the perfect storm that ended it all. Maybe one last question, Craig? If I got one. Wait. Yes?
What's the future of peaches?
Future's wonderful. Have you had any of the local peaches? I rest my case. Although I was having a little conversation back here, and I had somebody come in the stand the other day, and they said, my wife asked me, are your kids going to take over? Because you're old. And I said, no, it'll be condos someday, because you can't make a living at it. Not when Bob Schreit's property is selling for $500,000 for a lot. I mean, how many peaches can you sell to make that up? I personally worked, although I don't call it work because I love it, I worked 70 consecutive 12-hour days this year. And believe me, it's more about the love of the people and what I do than that. So, yes?
You said you have 300 trees with the other two growers. How many trees do they have?
I couldn't tell you exactly, but I think they probably, Dave Howell probably has about the same amount. He probably has 15 to 20 different varieties, and Quentin probably has 15 to 20 different varieties. Remember, I did tell you that they don't taste different, but I didn't. But what the reason is that a peach tree it comes in the same time every year. The peaches on that tree ripen the exact same week every year within a couple days, and last 5 to 7 days, and they're done. So if you're going to buy peaches from me or anybody else, unless I'm going to be just open for a week, I have to find a variety that ripens on the 4th of July, and the 10th of July, and the 20th of July, and the 30th of July, and August 8th, and August, and that's why we have all those varieties. They taste very much alike, with the exception of being cling or freestone, but they come in my case, 21 different times. The last ones being, for me, were 10 days ago. I think Dave Howell's, his last variety is coming in right now. Nope. Where? Well, my peaches were available until Labor Day on Northwest Catawba Road at Schwan Orchard's stand, the one with the big peach painted on the side of the building, which my son repainted this year, and I love him for it. Yeah, thank you. Yes?
What's the role of terroir? It's important for grapes.
Once again, please.
What's the role of terroir? You know, the land in terms it's important for grape flavor and wines. What about peaches?
This is extremely good land for peaches, with the exception of there is a lot of clay in the soil. And that's one of the reasons Alberta was a very popular peach, because it could withstand clay in the soil very well. But the the temperature that we have here, being surrounded by 22.5 gazillion gallons of water, that's a technical term. 22.5 gazillion gallons of water surrounding the beaches really makes it the temperature just right. And we have a lot of limestone in that rock that we've got. I think Craig's standing here. Did you notice? So I want to thank you. Anytime you see me, I could talk for hours about peaches, the history of peaches, the Alberta, the Red Haven, whatever. But I know when good enough is good enough. So thank you all for your attention.
Well, there's only one person here who has the ability to tell us whether all that's true or not. It's a woman who's been around long enough to have seen it all happen. She happens to be one of my favorite people, and she's back there trying to hide. Joanne Rhodes, can you hear us? There she is. This is Don Rhodes' wife, Joanne. She is Mrs. Catawba. She can tell you whether all this stuff happened the way we say it did. Thank you all for listening. Get back to helping the bartenders out. That's it. Bye-bye.